Chapter 2: Essential Chemistry for Biology. Matter is found on Earth in three primary physical states: solid, liquid, and gas. Matter is defined as anything that occupies space and has mass. Mass is a measure of the amount of a material in an object. All matter is composed of chemical elements. Elements are substances that cannot be broken down into other substances by chemical reactions. There are 92 naturally occurring elements. Some examples of these are carbon, oxygen, and gold. Each element has a symbol derived from its English, Latin, or German name. All of the elements are listed in the periodic table. Only 4 of these elements make up about 96% of the weight of the human body. These are oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen. Much of the remaining 4% is accounted for by 7 elements, including calcium, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, sodium, chloride, and magnesium. Less than 0.01% of your weight is made up of 14 trace elements. You only need very small amounts of these. However, you cannot live without them. An atom is the smallest unit of matter that still retains the properties of an element. Each element is made up of one kind of atom. The atoms in one element are different from the atoms of another element. A standard atom of any element will have an equal number of protons and electrons. Thus, its net charge is 0. Atoms are composed of 3 subatomic particles: protons, electrons, and neutrons. Protons exist in the nucleus of the atom and has a +1 charge. Electrons orbit around the nucleus of the atom and have a -1 charge. Neutrons exist in the nucleus of almost every atom, and neutrons have a 0 charge. The atomic number is the number of protons existing in the nucleus of the atom. The periodic table of elements lists the elements in order of their atomic numbers. Note that these atomic numbers are also the number of electrons. An atom's mass number is the sum of the number of protons and neutrons in the nucleus of the atom. The mass of a proton and the mass of a neutron are almost identical. Their masses are close to 1 Dalton. On the other hand, the electron has only about 1/2000th the mass of a proton, so we consider its mass to be approximately 0. An atom's atomic mass is listed in the periodic table as the bottom number. When atoms differ from one another according to their numbers of neutrons, they are considered isotopes. The different isotopes of an element have the same number of protons, but they differ in the number of neutrons. For example, carbon-12 has 6 neutrons and 6 protons. Carbon-13 has 7 neutrons and 6 protons, and carbon-14 has 8 neutrons and 6 protons. All 3 isotopes have 6 protons. Otherwise, they would not be identified as carbon. The isotope carbon-14 is radioactive. Scientists can calculate how old organic matter is since carbon-14 begins to decay at a steady rate when the organism dies. A radioactive isotope is one in which the nucleus decays spontaneously, shedding particles and energy in the form of radiation. Only electrons are directly involved in chemical reactions. In chemical reactions, there are 3 primary types of chemical bonds: ionic bonds, covalent bonds, and hydrogen bonds. When a chlorine atom and a sodium atom are near one another, the chlorine atom steals an electron from the sodium atom. This action turns the atoms into ions, which are essentially charged atoms. Sodium loses 1 electron becoming a sodium ion with a charge of +1. Chloride gains 1 electron, becoming a chloride ion with a charge of -1. Negatively charged ions often have names ending in "ide", such as chloride or fluoride. The sodium ion and chloride ion are held together by an ionic bond. This is the interaction that occurs between two oppositely charged ions. Compounds that are held together by ionic bonds are called ionic compounds, also known as salts. A covalent bond forms when two atoms share one or more pairs of electrons. Covalent bonds are the strongest of the 3 bonds we will talk about. The oxygen atom here shares 2 pairs of electrons with the carbon atom, forming a double bond. Each atom of hydrogen can form 1 covalent bond, and oxygen can form 2 covalent bonds. Finally, carbon forms 4 covalent bonds. A molecule of water consists of 2 hydrogen atoms joined to 1 oxygen atom by single covalent bonds. However, in a water molecule, the electrons are not shared equally. In fact, the oxygen carries a slightly negative charge, and each hydrogen carries a slight positive charge. This phenomenon is called polarity. The polarity of water results in a weak interaction between neighboring water molecules. These weak interactions are called hydrogen bonds. Molecules of DNA are held together by hydrogen bonds. In a chemical reaction, we begin with 1 or more chemicals called reactants. The reactants are changed somehow to form the end result, called products. Notice that the same total numbers of hydrogen and oxygen atoms are present in both the reactants and the products. They are just grouped differently. Chemical reactions cannot create or destroy matter. They can only rearrange it. There are 4 properties of water that are very important to life on our planet. This includes cohesiveness, the moderation of temperature, the biological significance of ice floating, and water as a solvent. Water molecules stick together as a result of hydrogen bonding. This tendency of molecules of the same kind to stick together is called cohesion. Trees, for example, depend upon cohesion to help the transport of water from their roots to their leaves. Hydrogen bonds also give water an unusually high surface tension, making it behave as though it were coated with an invisible film. For this reason, water bugs can easily walk on water. Water also has a stronger resistance to temperature change than most other substances. Because heat is first used to break the hydrogen bonds rather than raise the temperature, water essentially absorbs and stores large amounts of heat while warming up only a few degrees. Conversely, when water cools, hydrogen bonds form in a process that releases heat. Earth's water enables temperatures on the planet to stay within the limits that permit life. Water stores a huge amount of heat from the sun during warm periods, and it gives off that heat during cooler periods. Water also causes evaporative cooling. Evaporation is when a liquid changes to a gas. When a substance evaporates, the surface of the liquid that remains cools down. The molecules having the greatest heat tend to evaporate first. Evaporative cooling helps prevent some land-dwelling creatures from overheating, such as being able to go into a body of water, or sweating or panting. When water molecules get very cold, they move further away from one another. Ice floats in water because it is less dense than the water it floats in. The hydrogen bonds that form in solid ice last longer than those in liquid. When a deep body of water cools, a layer of ice forms on top. The floating ice acts as an insulated blanket over the liquid water, allowing life to persist underneath the frozen surface. If it were not for this insulating protection of a top layer of ice, all ponds, lakes, and even the ocean itself would eventually freeze solid, making life on our planet largely go extinct. Water is also considered a solvent of life. In a solution, the dissolving agent is called the solvent, and the substance that is dissolved is called a solute. When water is a solvent, we usually call the solution an aqueous solution. The fluids of organisms are aqueous solutions. Water is able to dissolve an enormous variety of solutes necessary for life, and they provide a medium for chemical reactions. In aqueous solutions, a very small percentage of the water molecules break apart into hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions. A chemical compound that releases hydrogen ions into a solution is called an acid. A base or alkali is a compound that accepts hydrogen ions and removes them from the solution. The pH scale is a measure of the hydrogen ions in a solution. The scale ranges from 0 to 14, 0 being the most acidic, and 14 the most basic or alkali. Each pH unit represents a tenfold change in the concentration. The pH of a solution inside most living cells is close to 7. Buffers are substances that minimize changes in pH by accepting hydrogen ions when that ion is in excess and donating hydrogen ions when it is depleted. Thank you for watching.